Okay, let's get started. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this evening, and thanks so much to everyone who's joined us. My name is Megan, and I'm a future student advisor, and joining me tonight is Associate Professor Debbie James, Course Chair and Head of Speech Pathology at Victoria University. Tonight we're going to be discussing our Bachelor of Speech and Languages Science / Master of Speech Pathology course. Just some background information on this course. It is a 4.5-year dual degree program, and it is relatively new. It ran for the first time at the beginning of this year. In this webinar, we're going to talk about the content that's covered in this course, as well as provide you with information about the campus and the facilities, as well as the admissions criteria for this degree. So once again, thanks everyone for joining us, and I do hope that you find this session helpful and informative. Just before we begin, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land which we live, work and study on today. And I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And I'll just go over some housekeeping rules for tonight. Firstly, this presentation will be recorded for repurposing. All participants will receive a copy of the recording via email. Secondly, all attendees are muted and not visible, so none of the panelists can see or hear you. And finally, if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please leave them in the Q&A box of this window, not the chat box, the Q&A box, please. And depending on the question, it might be answered live during the presentation, or you will receive a written response from our colleagues working behind the scenes. So we'll start out with a bit of an introduction to the speech pathology profession. So Debbie, could you tell us a bit about the speech pathology profession and what a speech pathologist actually does?
Certainly, Megan, but before I start, I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm very pleased to be talking to you about speech pathology and our new course here at Victoria University. As Megan said, it began this year. So next year would be our second intake of students into this course. So as you can see on the slide, speech pathologists, sometimes referred to as speech language pathologists, work to prevent and assess and diagnose and treat people who have got problems with their talking. And the thing that might surprise you there is that speech pathologists also work with people who have problems with swallowing, so that's in children and in adults. So the key thing is that they work with people who have communication difficulties and work with swallowing people, and those communication difficulties might be to do with their pronunciation, so they might have difficulty saying some words, or it might be that they have difficulty in understanding what is said to them or formulating sentences to respond back. And one of the other areas is working with people who, for various reasons, are not able to use spoken language to communicate, so they might need to use computers and generated voice to be able to communicate. So back to you, Megan.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Debbie. And now we'll just touch on some of the highlights of studying this degree at Victoria University. So these are just some of the many benefits of studying speech pathology with us. Could you tell us, Debbie, a little bit more about these highlights of the course and what students can expect to look forward to if they enrol in this course?
Yeah. But probably what I'd suggest you do is look about 2/3 of the way down, and you can see that, as Megan said, this is a double degree. So you come out with 2 degrees, a bachelor degree and a master's year, and it takes you 4.5 years to do, and that's a good half year shorter than if you were doing 2 separate degrees. So the design is such that you can fast track it. And this also means that you're going to graduate mid-year rather than the end of the year, and there's lots of advantages of that. One is that means that you'll be applying for jobs at times when students graduating from other universities won't be, because they typically graduate at the end of a calendar year, not halfway through. And the budgeting of many places, this works well for them, so that new monies sometimes become available partway through the year, so that puts you in a good position to be applying for jobs. Okay. Megan, I think you're going to be talking about the VU block model, aren't you?
Correct,
That's
yes.
Another reason. So we might just delay talking about that for a moment, because Megan will speak about that more as we go through the presentation. So other things about the features of this course, if we look right to the bottom of that slide, sometimes what happens when people go through a course, they get partway through and they think, maybe this isn't for me after all. But then they just think, oh, look, I'm so far through it, really, I've got to stick with it and all those sorts of things. So you will have the option of exiting after 3 years with a complete bachelor degree. And that would give you the opportunities of going on and pursuing other things. So that's an attractive point too. The final point is that some of you might be interested in this aspect of it too, is that we're going to have what's called a graduate entry master's course. So that means that you could come into this course after completing another bachelor degree. So that might be of interest to you as well. Megan, are there things there that we should be talking about now that we're not going to be talking about later? Because we're going to talk about the facilities and...
We will, yeah, we'll go over that later. Yeah, no problems. All right, well, as Debbie just explained, there are so many benefits of this degree, especially if you choose to study it at Victoria University. Another highlight of studying with us is that you get to study this course using our revolutionary block model. For those of you that haven't heard of the block model, this refers to the way we have structured our degree programs so that you only study one subject at a time as opposed to 4 subjects at a time like at other universities. Some of the benefits of the block model, firstly, your transition to uni will be a lot easier. So when you first start uni, it can be pretty daunting to make that transition, and having to juggle the demands for 4 different subjects at the same time, that can only add to the stress and make you feel more overwhelmed. But with the block model, because you only need to focus on one subject at a time, this makes the transition a lot easier for you, which will help to set you up for success and build confidence in your studies. You'll also feel more supported with the block model, as we have smaller class sizes than other universities. That means you get more one-on-one time with your teachers. It also means that classes are more interactive, making it easier to collaborate and have discussions with your teacher as well as your classmates. And most importantly, you'll feel less stressed, and less stress means more success. So instead of stressing out over 4 subjects and worrying how you're going to fit the demands of those subjects into your schedule, you just need to focus on one subject, which will help you to get better grades. It also increases your chances of overall success in your studies. And if you're interested in the subject that you're enrolled in, you can completely immerse yourself in it and enjoy all that that subject has to offer without the distractions of the other subjects you need to study. And if you don't enjoy that particular subject, it's over in 4 weeks and you don't need to wait 6 months to finish that unit and receive your results like at other universities. And now I'm just going to play a short video for you, and this is just a basic summary of the block model in 60 seconds.
We've been teaching the same way for hundreds of years now, but the world around us has changed, and along with it, employer and industry needs. So at VU, we changed the way you learn with our Australian-first block model. Traditionally, you juggle the demands and deadlines of 4 units at once. Instead, the VU block model has you focus on 1 unit at a time. Each year will be broken into 2 semesters. Each semester will be broken into 4 blocks, which run for 4 weeks. You focus on 1 unit in each block, completing all your assessments before moving on to the next. So, instead of this, VU's block model looks like this. The block model offers you flexible study options, support from 1 teacher per unit, and practical hands-on teaching methods that prepare you for your future. So when you study at VU, you know you'll gain the support and skills you need to succeed.
Okay, hope everybody enjoyed that short film. Now, just to, we're going to talk a bit about the course structure now and what is covered in this degree. So these are the units that students will study in the first 2 years of the program. Debbie, could you perhaps give us a bit of a rundown on what students can expect to learn in the first 2 years of the degree?
Yeah, Megan, I'm not able to see the presentation at the moment. There we go. I've got that fixed now. Sorry about that. Okay. So as you can see there, you'll be doing lots of different units over the first year. So you start off by with doing an introduction to speech pathology. So that gives you an outline of what the discipline involves, and you really get to know that quite well. And then that that forms the platform for you to go off and work in these other areas. So speech pathology, we describe often as a fusion between biomedical science and social science. So what you can see there in that first year is that you're looking at psychology, anatomy and physiology, interpersonal skills, so learning all these skills of communicating with people that have different needs, and looking at public health, more anatomy and physiology, and learning about diversity. And in second year, you can see some of these things are happening again, so more on the anatomy and physiology, but you're also starting to learn about linguistics, which is the studies of language, and looking at things like grammar that you might have already had something to do with at school. But you also learn about health development, health promotion, and we have a big emphasis here on this uni about Indigenous health and wellbeing. And you can see here, you start learning about the neurosciences. So what year 1 and year 2 cover are the foundational areas to speech pathology. So this is building the platform of the key areas that you need to know about to build into the speech pathology area. So, so we're going to talk about the next year.
Yep.
Now, Megan. Okay.
No problems. Yep. So this is the middle of the degree, more specifically year 3. So these are the units that are covered in year 3 of the course. The second half of year 3 is the graduate entry point of this course for students that already hold a bachelor degree, and yeah, students can also choose to exit this program at the end of year 3 and graduate with a Bachelor of Speech and Language Sciences. So Debbie, could you tell us a bit more?
Can I just come in there and just make a comment there, because what's important for you to know is that if you choose to exit the degree at the end of the 3-year point, as Megan said, you've got a Bachelor of Speech and Language Sciences, and at that point, that means that you're not eligible to be a speech pathologist. You can't work in that. So some of the other things that you might want to go into, you might want to look to going into, say, a course like physiotherapy. So you might, and physiotherapy starting up at BU next year, so it might mean that you could apply to go into the graduate entry program of that. Or it might be that you want to change directions completely and go into other graduate programs. So in a sense, that's opening up lots of options for you to go into other areas. You might want to go into, say, something like psychology. So you need to be looking at some of the requirements there for those particular courses. Okay, sorry, Megan, you wanted to say something else? So.
Oh yeah, if you could just give us just a really brief rundown on what's covered in year 3 of this course.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay, so what you'll see now is you're starting to really hone in on the aspects of speech and language pathology. So you can see there that you're learning more about communication and the development across the lifespan. That first unit, phonetics and phonology and acoustics, that's really looking at the sound system. And the acoustics part of it starts going into, you know, that could lead you off into an area of things like artificial speech, speech generation. So it gives you some of those building blocks there. So it's almost getting into a bit of sort of physics of sound and those sorts of things too. So that might be of interest to you. You'll see there that there's a social work unit in there. So often people that speech pathologists see have been through difficult periods, and you know, we see things like we think about what's happened in Victoria this year with COVID. Many people have gone through horrendous situations with things like the bushfire. So sometimes people become very upset and distressed, and we need to have the skills to be able to support people who have had some sort of trauma. So these will position you to do those sorts of things. And this is another advantage of our course, because you're going to be learning those sorts of things with social work students and learning the intersection between your profession and a profession like social work. And that mimics what goes on in the workplace, because many people work in teams of multiple disciplines, and I have worked side by side with social workers, and you may well be too. Then in the second semester, we're starting to get into the really specific speech pathology things, and you're going to be doing a whole lot of work there and learning about the ways of assessing people and ascertaining what their needs are as it relates to the speech and language and swallowing areas. So there we go. Excuse me, I just need to cough.
Thanks so much for that, Debbie. And finally, we have Year 4 and the final semester of the course in Year 5, which make up the Master's component of the degree. Debbie, could you tell us a bit about the Master's component and what this part of the course entails?
Sure. So what you'll notice in this first group of units here, this is where we start looking at the things you can do to help people maximise their skills and learn to improve their speech and their language and their communication and their swallowing. And this unit here, it doesn't really look like it, but this is where you start the clinical placement. So you're going out to industry and working in practices and learning the skills that you need to have for working within industry. This is where you'll start looking at very specific areas of speech pathology. So this might be, okay, what do you do when you work with someone who has, say, been in a car accident, or someone who's had a stroke, or someone who's grown up with a childhood disability, so something like autism? How do you work with people who have things like autism? And again, you'll see another clinical practice. And then in the final half semester, you'll see that this is all clinically based. So you'll spend that whole semester basically in placements, developing the final skills. And then at this point, you'll be through and ready to graduate.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Debbie. We did actually have a great question come in before. I'm just going back to the graduate entry of this course.
Yep.
Can you have any bachelor degree in order to start this course at graduate entry level?
That's a very good question. What we would strongly encourage people to do is to have a background in the biomedical sciences and or in the linguistic sciences. So that will position you well to come into the course. It's probably going to be easier to do courses that are in the biomedical sciences, and what we'll look at is having some bridging courses to help you develop some of those under some of these foundational areas. Another thing that's a very good thing to have is languages. So if you've learned another language, that's a fabulous foundation for linguistics in speech pathology, but also a fabulous skill to have in terms of work as well, because our Australian population is so diverse with its many languages. So thank you about asking that question.
No worries. Thanks so much, Debbie. And moving on to our industry connections. So as you see here, we have quite a few industry connections at VU that help us to ensure our courses are not only up to date, but designed with the latest expertise and technology. And it also allows our students to build connections with industry representatives, and it allows us to arrange internships and work placements for students where they put the work they do in the classroom into practice. Debbie, could you tell us a bit more about what placement in this course involves? And could you also tell us, do the students need to find the placement themselves?
Absolutely not is the answer to the second question. No, that's something that the university does on your behalf. And that's quite a complicated process because there's all sorts of things that you need to have in place. So when you're working in settings with children, you probably already know this, but you need to have a working in children's check, and we need to be able to verify that you've got those sorts of things. So no, there's no need for you to be concerned about organising your own placements. So that's a very good question to have. So thank you for asking that one. I just want to draw your attention to that first logo you can see there on the left, called Speech Pathology Australia. Speech Pathology Australia is our professional body, and they are the ones that set the standards that you need to meet upon graduation, and that's part of the accreditation process of ensuring that you do meet those standards, and the university needs to be able to prove to the professional association that upon graduation you will meet those standards and therefore the accreditation standards of the profession. And part of that is that you need to be deemed to be eligible for membership of the professional association upon graduation. These are the sorts of types of places that you may have places in. So Mercy Health is one example of that. Another example is the education and training department, so working in schools. So we'll be looking for you to have placements in schools, because school age population is a very big clientele of ours, and about half the speech pathologists that graduate work in schools in some capacity. So they might work for a place like the education department, or you might work with some of the other sectors like the Catholic sector or the independent school sectors. So lots of people work in those areas. There are also many private practices that provide services to schools. So there are a range of ways in which you might be working with schools. So they're a very big employment area, and that's also going to be, or that is a point of our course, that you'll be really well prepared to work within schools. Western Health is one of the regional areas of health, and there's lots of hospitals and other health services in the area that surround Victoria University that engage speech pathologists. So places like Sunshine Hospital, Footscray Hospital, all those hospitals employ speech pathologists.
Wonderful.
And you could have a placement in a place like that.
Fantastic, thanks Debbie. And moving on to our to career opportunities in speech pathology. So after graduating as a speech pathologist, there are many areas you can find work in. Some of them are outlined on this page. Could you tell us, Debbie, a little bit more about the career opportunities that are available after completing this course?
Yep. So as I've said, the big opportunities within the whole education aspect. So schools, but also let's think about tertiary level education. So lots of people go into academic teaching and research, so there are lots of opportunities opening up. That's a growing area because there's been many more speech pathology programs that have been starting. So as you can see, our Victoria University has just started one this year, and I'm aware of many more that have been starting around the country. And I have just noticed this last week that there's lots of jobs that are being advertised in this area. And people might want to go into a research career as well. So those are big areas that are opening up. Health, as we've said, another big growing area here, and you may be aware of this, is the disability area. And this is the advent of our innovative National Disability Insurance Scheme. So there's lots and lots of work that's happening there, and I keep an eye on the job advertisements, and these organisations are advertising for people all the time. So there's lots of new openings happening there. I mentioned that people work in private practice, and those private practices are hugely varied. So you might have what we might call single operator practices, where a speech pathologist works in a sole capacity, or some of them work in many big private practices that employ a number of different people across a range of disciplines. And some of these are national organisations now that have services throughout various states. Lots of openings in the aged care area, and also what I'm seeing more and more is are job opportunities in terms of helping people who have sustained some sort of injury regaining work after that injury. But other big areas too, and I want to draw your attention to that second last point, is that speech pathologists do a lot of work with professional voice users. So they work with people who are singers and actors. So quite often you might notice in the credits of musicals like Billy Elliot and others that have been on but have been interrupted because of COVID. The speech pathologists are there in the background, helping them with and coaching them in how to use their voice safely, so when they're singing they don't end up with a strained voice and a husky voice, and similarly with acting. So those are areas that are growing too. But of course, speech pathologists also work with other professional voice users, such as people like teachers, auctioneers. They're ones that often come to see speech pathologists too, because they might be using their voice in a way that ends up that their voice is feeling strained, or they've got sore throats at the end of the day. So speech pathologists can work with those people to help them learn to use their voice in a safe way. And an area that's really developing is working with people that are in the justice system. So speech pathologists are working in areas in prisons and with youth justice systems as well. So there's a big variety, and it just keeps on growing. Okay, I think that's
about it. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Debbie. So many great career opportunities for this course. And we're just going to talk a bit now about the campus locations and the facilities that students get to use as part of this degree. The majority of the workshops and classes take place at our Footscray Park campus. That's our biggest campus in the heart of Melbourne's multicultural hub in Footscray. Quite a bit of practical work is undertaken at the Sunshine Clinical School, which is a brand new facility that opened in March this year, just before we went into lockdown. And some of the features there include simulation labs, tutorial rooms, and state-of-the-art learning spaces. Debbie, could you tell us a bit more about the facilities that students get to use at the Sunshine Clinical School?
Certainly. That's as Megan was saying, it's a brand new facility, and there's facilities within that that will enable you to do a whole lot of interprofessional learning with courses like nutrition and dietetics, and the physiotherapy students as well. So one of the things that you heard me mention before talking about swallowing. So sometimes people, when they've had some sort of illness, they may need a lot of modification of their food. So we work with dietitians to do that food modification. So the dietitians are there helping to make sure that the food is nutritious, whereas speech pathologists are working with them to work out that the way the food is prepared is safe for people to swallow. And we've all had the experience when you choke on something, when you're swallowing it and you're coughing and coughing. And for people that have got illnesses, sometimes that can be a very dangerous thing, because it means that food can be going down into the lungs rather than into the stomach. So those facilities at Sunshine are going to be useful for that sort of thing.
Fantastic. And apart from Footscray Park and the Sunshine Clinical School, students also get the opportunity to work at our anatomy lab at the St Albans campus, which is not far from the Sunshine Clinical School. Victoria University we're actually one of the few universities that holds a license to access cadavers and wet specimens in this anatomy lab. So Debbie, could you tell us a bit more about what students will use at the anatomy lab and what sort of work they undertake there?
Yep, sure. So in all the anatomy and physiology units, there's lots of lab work that goes with that. So you can see in that picture that there's lots of models of humans. So you can see some skulls there, you can see some pictures of the torso from the top of their head to basically the bottom of their chest. And speech pathologists need to understand the workings of all that well, because one of the things that is important for us to be able to speak is to have good breath control. So you need to understand things like how the lungs work, how the larynx works, and these are all governed by the brain. So you need to understand how the brain's working. So you will be looking at all these sorts of things, and you'll see these in the labs. So you'll see real models, but you also see those plastic ones. And there's all sorts of resources that go with that. So there are some fantastic things in the anatomy library. So you can see there the anatomy TV. So that's a facility whereby you can go on and really have a good look at various body parts and really get to understand what they look like in 3D, because some of the things that are difficult to imagine when you see them on a book on a page, when they're in 2D, sometimes seeing them in 3D is very helpful, and that's what you will do there in the anatomy lab. The other thing I want to alert you to that we have at the St Albans campus is that there's what we refer to as simulated hospital wards. And these are great opportunities, and this is what you'll be doing, and you start this actually in first year in that unit that I was talking about, in Introduction to Speech Pathology, where you go in and you look at those wards and start imagining what it's like to work in those places. And we have lots of fun doing that, because you're able to get on the beds and work out how the machinery works to move them up and down, but also you start doing some practice things in terms of the sorts of things that you would do as a speech pathologist in the ward. So it's an introduction to what you'll be doing when you go out to placements of real hospitals. So back to you, Megan.
Wonderful, thanks Debbie. And moving on to the admission criteria for this course. So if you're a Year 12 student or if you've recently completed Year 12, just as a guide, the ATAR last year was 72.20. That's a guide only, just bear in mind that it does fluctuate every year. If you're in Year 12 and participating in sport, whether it be as a player, a coach or an official, you might be eligible for an ATAR adjustment through our Elite Athlete program. That's a separate application you can submit after applying for the actual course. We do have further information about this on our website, but if you'd like further information about the program, please reach out to us. We can help you with that. Apart from the ATAR, you also need to complete Units 3 and 4 as part of your VCE and achieve a study score of at least 30 in EAL English or 25 in any other English. You will also need a study score of at least 20 in 2 of biology, chemistry, physics, any mathematics, psychology, sociology, text and traditions, health and human development, or any LOTE unit. For students that, for applicants that have completed VET or higher education studies, you might be considered for the course if you completed a diploma or advanced diploma in health or community services or similar. If you've completed at least 2 semesters, which is 1 year, of a degree in health sciences, social sciences, education or similar, or if you already hold a completed degree in any discipline, you're also welcome to apply for first year entry. In order to be considered for second year entry for this course, you will need to complete at least 2 semesters in any one of those degrees outlined on this page. All these courses are part of our College of Health and Biomedicine, so there's quite a few to choose from there. Places are limited for both first and second year. You will be ranked for second year, you will be ranked according to your weighted average mark in those first 2 semesters of study.
Megan, can I just come in there and just talk to that, because that's
yes.
An important aspect and feature of our course here at VU. So it might be that for some reason during first year, you might change your mind about what you're wanting to do. So we've set it up so you can hopefully transfer courses. But this is also an alternative entry route. So maybe you miss out on getting into speech pathology after Year 12, but you could apply to some of these other courses, such as the Bachelor of Health Science, and then apply to transfer into speech pathology at the end of that. And one of the, I don't think it's there on the page, but should you do that and you're successful in transferring into speech pathology, that means you come straight into second year and you do not need to do any more first year subjects, because you're given complete credit for your first year in any of those degrees to then move into the speech pathology unit.
Fantastic, thanks Debbie. And finally, I'm just going to let you know about the dates for the applications and the application process for this course. So all applications must be made through VTAC. That's vtac.edu.au. Applications for our February 2021 intake are open now and they will close on the 30th of September. At this stage, there's only 1 yearly intake for this course, which is February, so there's no mid-year intake for the course at this stage. However, if that changes in the future, obviously we will update our website to reflect this information. That's another benefit of our block model, is it does allow us to have multiple intakes per year for some of our courses, rather than just the beginning and the middle of the year. And that brings us to the end of the webinar.
Hang on, can you just go back to that slide? I just want to point out there that closing date, that's referred to as a timely application. So that's one round. There are opportunities to apply later if that's the case.
Absolutely. Thanks, Debbie. And yeah, that brings us to the end of the presentation. So I'd like to thank everyone firstly for tuning in tonight. If you do have any questions, please leave them in the Q&A box if you haven't done so already. And we will have your questions answered before we log off. As mentioned earlier, everyone who registered for this webinar will receive a recording via email. If it's not tomorrow, it will hopefully be the day after. So keep an eye on your inbox and check your junk mail folder as well. Our contact details are in the email if you want to reach out to us for further information. If you have no further questions, feel free to log off now. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We do hope that you enjoyed tonight's session and managed to get some of the information that you're looking for. And just a couple of questions that have come in, Deb. Could you let us know a bit more? I think you mentioned earlier, but exiting this program at the bachelor level, does that allow you to work as a speech pathologists, or what other opportunities might be available for those graduates?
Sorry, can I just clarify the question? Did you say, does it allow you to work as a speech pathologist, or does it
Yes.
not?
Yeah.
No. So if you exit at the end of the bachelor component of the speech and language sciences course, no, that's a general degree, and that doesn't provide you with the background to be able to practice as a speech pathologist. You need to do the master's component. So the way the course is structured at VU is that you need to do both the bachelor and the master's degree to qualify as a speech pathologist. So if you decide to leave after completing the bachelor course, as I was saying before, then that would position you to look at other options that might be available to you, and those are always going to be subject to the entry requirements of going into other courses. But it could be openings into things like psychology. It might give you an opening into graduate courses in things like physiotherapy and other health sciences areas like that, or you might want to completely change directions. So it'll give you a bachelor degree and enable you to start pursuing other areas as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Debbie. Another interesting question, is there a thesis for the master's component of this course?
Oh, what a very good question. No, there isn't a thesis component of that, but there's the last 2 units that you might recall there that are predominantly clinical units. With each of those, there's a project. So it's sort of like a very minor thesis, if you want to, but it's not a thesis per se.
Fantastic. Another question, do we need to do a portfolio that reflects we have met, I'm not sure what that is, sorry, CBOS standards?
Yeah, I can see that, yes. So, okay, that's a very good question. So thank you to the person who asked that one. Yes, you will need to do a portfolio that demonstrates that you've met the CBOS standards. Now, that's possibly worthwhile speaking to for a moment, because CBOS is the competency-based occupational standards. That may change because the speech pathology profession is just introducing some new standards. And so quite how that's going to play out, that's all in negotiation at the moment, but that may change in terms of how that operates for our course. But we're just watching that space at the moment.
Fantastic.
I can see another question there about entry open. Sorry, what's that for mature age students? Is that?
Yeah, it's quite a few, a couple of questions about mature age student entry. Are you able to elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think Megan went through some of those options if you want to come into the whole 4.5-year course. So there are options that way. So it might be worthwhile. Can we just track back into the presentation, Megan,
Yep.
to just show that back up again? No. You just. I think is it the previous one? No, it must. But certainly, I mean, if you're a mature age student, there are certainly options there in terms of being able to apply into the course. So it might be that you come via the that second point there on the slide, so the higher education study, and it may well be that you can. Actually, I think we might just come to Kylie for that one. Kylie, are you able to comment on that aspect there, or whether you can join us there? Maybe she can't.
I know I'm here.
Thank you.
I've been madly typing some responses to some of our lovely attendees. So obviously students that are coming in as a mature age student, we need to consider what you've done previously. So if you've completed a bachelor degree in a non-related field, like I think there was a question in the Q&A around marketing or a business qualification, then you would need to apply for the dual degree commencing in the bachelor, because you haven't got that same discipline knowledge in either health, social sciences or education. So you would need to start at the bachelor level, irrespective of the fact that you have a bachelor degree already in a different discipline. Students that have completed study to go into the grad entry into the masters, they would obviously, and Deb spoke about that previously, they would need to, and we're not at that master's point yet because it's a new course, but they would need to have done study in a similar discipline at a bachelor level, completed bachelor level, to be granted entry at the master's level into speech pathology, because you need that requisite knowledge in a health or education biomedical science discipline. I hope that answers that question.
And there's another question there, and I think I can answer this question. So this question's about being to put in an expression of interest at the second year entry, and do they have to go via VTAC to do that?
I'm happy to take that question if you like, Debbie.
Yeah, that'd be good, thank you.
So we are working with our current VU students in those approved second year entry courses. So I've popped into the Q&A a list of those courses, and they are on our website. So if you are a current student on the webinar in one of those courses, you probably have received an email from me giving you an option to express interest, or in the future, and that will happen next year as well. You will be able to apply direct through an expression of interest process that we will contact you about at the relevant point in time. And if you are a current student on the webinar, we'll pop some details in the chat box for you to reach out and ask further questions about that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kylie.
One question was, how many students were in the first cohort this year? We had 11 students in our first cohort this year, so we were absolutely delighted with that, because the approval of the course occurred during last year, and it meant we had a very short marketing phase, so we were absolutely delighted that we had that number of students. The full entry quote, well, it's not a quota, but the sort of rough numbers for first year are around the 20 mark. We're also expecting that people will transfer over from second year, so we'll look to having a full complement of about 30 to 35 students in the bachelor degree, and then we're looking for about maybe 20 odd to come in through the graduate entry route as well. So I hope that answers that question in terms of how many were here with us this year.
Fantastic, Debbie, thanks. Not sure if you can also answer, or maybe Kylie, the one about second year entry, would you get credits for any of those approved courses?
Yes. Yep, I can answer that question. So if you're coming in via that second year entry route, whereby you've done one of those, actually, could you just go back to that slide that shows the approved courses, the eligible courses? Okay, so if you're coming in from any of one of those courses, and if you've completed, well, I mean, you will have had to have completed first year successfully to even be considered for going into second year entry, but that means that all those units count that you've done. Say you do the Bachelor of Health Science, all the units you've done in first year would count towards the second year, so you get credit for the entire year. So you're just moving straight into second year and joining the other speech pathology students. And in fact, what will happen is that you'll find that many of the units that you do in those degrees are ones that the speech pathology students do. So for example, if you look at the Bachelor of Health Sciences, there are 4 units that you do in common. I hope that answers that question. So for the person who asked that question, if that doesn't answer it, could you just pop another question into the Q&A, please?
Thanks so much, Debbie. We just had that final question there about a student that already holds a marketing degree. Would that qualify for entry into the Masters? I assume the graduate entry, could that possibly be a good course to enter with?
Look, I'm going to go back to Kylie for that point, because that was something that she was speaking to before. So Kylie, can I get you to come in there again, please?
Look, I think in short, without knowing enough information about that particular applicant or prospective student, they did talk about some tertiary teaching as well. So happy to also take that one offline and have a more detailed conversation. Yep. Generally, a marketing qualification wouldn't allow you to cover the prerequisite knowledge in health sciences, educational, social sciences to meet the learning outcomes probably required for the Masters, Debbie.
Correct.
So, but obviously you've mentioned tertiary teaching. So if you'd like to reach out to us, we can have a look at what else you've covered in your background as well. But a marketing degree would be unlikely.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kylie. And that's all of the questions answered. So I guess we can wrap this up now. So once again, I'd like to thank everyone who has logged in and joined this webinar for tonight. Just a reminder that you will receive a recording of this webinar. If it's not tomorrow, hopefully it should be the day after. It's also got our contact details in the email, so feel free to reach out to us if we can assist you further, particularly if you have any questions around your specific background and your eligibility, because we will need to look further into your history and your study history to give you a good sort of indication. But yeah, thank you once again. Thanks everyone. Thanks so much everyone who has joined us tonight. Thanks so much Debbie and Kylie for your information you provided tonight, and we do hope to receive your application soon. So thanks everyone. Have a great night.
I'd like to join thanks and say thank you all for attending. It's fantastic, and we hope to see you next year or at a time when you might choose to enter the course.
Thanks everyone. We hope to receive your application soon. Have a good night and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.